Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening.
Today we're here in Miami, Oklahoma at J&M Farms.
You may not realize that Oklahoma produces mushrooms, but at J&M Farms they produce 8 to 8.5 million pounds of mushrooms per year.
And it's not an operation down in a cave or an old mine shaft using horse manure. It's a very efficient, very modern indoor farm.
So let's start our tour now. Here now to start us off on our tour of our indoor farm is Pat Juergensmeyer of J&M Mushroom Farm. Now Pat, this is what the mushrooms are grown in. What is this in here and how do you get it?
This is what we call compost. It's the medium, it's the farmer's soil. We have to produce it all our own. It's mainly wheat straw. Each crop has about 140 tons of straw in it and a lot of water. About 70% of the weight of this is water weight. It also has some other ingredients in it. It will have a little bit of chicken litter. It'll have some gypsum. It'll have some crushed soybeans, a cottonseed meal, and all those add a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of protein in order to give the mushroom what it needs to grow.
Sounds an awful lot like garden compost.
It's a lot like garden compost, and what we're doing, we're providing a prime, optimum environment to grow fungus, which a mushroom really is.
How do you produce this compost?
This starts out, we're hauling in this wheat straw. We break the bales up, we form it in big piles, what we call an area called the wharf. Each and every other day, these piles are flipped and we add water at that time. The straw has a waxy texture to it, and what our goal is out here is to break down that waxy texture so that the mushroom can penetrate into that straw material and use it as a food source.
You're turning these every day. Why?
In order to get enough oxygen in there so it doesn't go anaerobic on us and it will compost rather than rot. And we can also add moisture at this time, or by not adding water to it, we can help dry it out if it becomes too wet.
How long do they stay in those big piles?
They'll stay in those big piles. That pile moves along, and each time it moves from one position to the other takes about 3 days, and then to move through there. And there's 5 piles out here, and then we move it underneath the wharf roof, and it's formed in long rows that we call ricks.
And the ricks, how long do they stay in the ricks?
The ricks will stay there for approximately a week, and every 3 days they'll take that a rick, and that is equal to a crop. They will take that rick and fill it into our filling machine, and it will actually take these empty trays, fill the compost material into it, pack it back down. We can add water at that time if it needs to, if our dry weight's a little off. We can then take, and the machine will stack them back up, and we bring them into a room what we call a phase 2 room.
What happens there?
In the phase 2 room, we finish the composting. The compost itself has a lot of microorganisms in it, and due to this microorganism activity, will generate a lot of heat. The compost will actually finish its composting stage, and then we also sterilize the material at this point. We take it, and because it generates this heat, it will start to increase the internal temperature, will start to rise. When it does this, we will inject live steam and bring it along, and we'll bring it up to about 140 degrees for approximately 2 hours, 3 hours, and hold it there, and we'll kill off any molds or funguses, any fly pollen we may have with a mushroom fly. Hopefully, in theory, we come out with a sterile compost, so that when we put the mushroom seed or spawn in it, it doesn't have anything to compete against.
And once it cools off, we're at the stage that we're at here.
We're in a phase 2 room right now, and what you're looking at is compost that has already been what we call peak heat, has already gone through that process. It has a warm texture to it yet because of the activity still going on. We'll slowly cool this back down till we hit about a 90 degree. We don't like to put the seed or the spawn in it until we at least have 90 degrees or lower. and that gives the mycelium from the spawn a chance to get started in this compost.
So all these steps up until now are just preparing the soil for growing
Just
the
preparing
mushrooms.
the
You
soil.
haven't started growing the mushrooms now.
That's right. There's nothing in here that could any way form a mushroom. What you're looking at is just an unplanted field.
Well, now let's go join Sue, and she'll show you the actual planting of the mushroom farm here and growing of the mushrooms.
So now that we have an unplanted field of compost in a tray ready to go, we're now ready to grow mushrooms. And here I have Ted Kaufman. He is the grower manager here at J&M Farms. And Ted, how do we start a mushroom?
Well, from the point of the finished compost in phase 2 rooms, we take the trays with the finished material and put them on the end of this mechanical line. At this point, we bring the trays down the line and actually physically pick them up and put the compost into the upper level, at which point the empty tray comes back down and moves under the upper level to the other end where the compost will fall back into that. As it moves across the top, we mix in this rye grain material, which is a spawn inoculum for the mushroom. It's a sterile culture of rye grain that has been inoculated with the mushroom, and the tissue, since it's on a rye grain, is very easily mixed into the compost. At the same time, we put in to the material, into the compost, a soybean additive, which has been treated to delay the release of the food. And compost then will fall into the empty tray and be pressed, taken off the other end of the line, and taken then into one of our spawn running rooms.
So you inoculate the compost with the spawn that's on the rye, and then you use the soybean as a type of fertilizer
That's
for the
correct.
mushrooms. Okay, can we take a look at one of those trays that have been
Certainly.
inoculated? So Ted, where are we now?
Well, this is the spawn running room, and these trays have just come off the line. They've been inoculated with the mushroom spawn and also supplemented with a soybean meal material. And I'll just pull out a few grains of the mushroom spawn and show you.
So those are the actual rye grains that have been...
That is the rye grain that has the mycelium of the mushroom growing on it. And it makes for a very good material to mix in with the compost.
And how long will you leave these trays in here?
These trays will be in here about 2 weeks, at which time that dark brown compost should be completely colonized with the mushroom.
What is happening with the mushroom spawn? Is that sprouting or?
Well, the grain has been cooked, so it won't sprout, but the mushroom mycelium, after about 3 days, will start to move off of that grain. And it really moves fairly quickly, so that in 2 weeks, this entire block of brown compost will be almost white.
And covered with
mushroom mycelium.
And the soybeans are there to give it protein.
That's right. There's quite a bit of protein there, and it's primarily for protein supplement.
Now, when these are finished here, they'll look completely white. You have some that already look that way?
We do have some. I'll show you in
gardeners?
the next room that will give you a good idea on what it looks like in 14 days.
Let's go take a look at them.
Okay.
So Ted, this white fuzzy material is the mycelial growth you're talking about. What part of the mushroom is that exactly?
Well, this white material is really the bulk of the mushroom. As this was in here, and this has been here about 2 weeks, all of that brown compost has been colonized by the mushroom tissue, causing it to turn white. At this stage, the mushroom is storing up the energy that it will use to produce the mushrooms you're used to seeing on the peat moss, which we put on in the next stage. This entire one tray is really one unit of mushroom that has all grown together, storing up food for the mushroom body production.
And it's been living off of the compost and the soybeans?
That's right. It's stored up its energy from the compost and the soybean additive, and of course there's quite a bit of water stored up in the mycelium.
I see. There's kind of a stuffy type smell in here. What is that?
Well, this room, having been in here for 2 weeks, has quite a high CO2 level. Mushrooms can use CO2 as a food substance, and will tie up some of that carbon in making food themselves.
And so the smell we are smelling in here is a high carbon dioxide.
That's right. It's a very
level.
high carbon dioxide level.
And that's good for the mushroom.
Very good for the mushroom.
I see. Well, now from here we cover them with the peat moss.
From here we'll take them out and put them back on the line and put about 2 inches of peat moss on every tray.
On every tray. And from there we're ready to actually see the mushrooms growing that we're used to.
That's right. In about 14 more days we'll have the little mushrooms formed on top of the peat moss.
Are there some of those that we can go see?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's take a look at them. Ted, these really look more like mushrooms to me. Now, you mentioned that we put the peat moss over the mycelium. What steps come after that?
Well, this particular room, we put the peat moss on 2 weeks ago. And these are already little mushroom initials that are forming. And this peat moss takes about, it takes about 7 days for the mushroom to grow up from that compost cake through the peat moss.
The mycelium grows up
That's
through
right.
there?
The mushroom mycelium grows up through, as you can see here. And when that hits the surface, about 7 days after we put it on, we drop the air temperature very quickly and bring in a lot of fresh air. And that causes the little mushroom pins to form on the surface. Now this is about 14 days, so this would be 7 days after the shocking occurs.
And the shocking is the temperature drop, and it makes
right.
them think it's fall, and
That's right. Basically, we're trying to simulate what happens out in nature in the fall and the spring when there are temperature swings up and down. So what we do in here is drop the air temperature about 10 degrees, bringing in a lot of fresh air. And that, of course, lowers the CO2 level, and the little mushroom pins then form on the surface.
Well, I notice there's a lot of water dripping in here. You have to keep these pretty moist, I guess.
Yes, we do. We have to keep the peat moss as wet as possible, and this particular room was just watered, and there is some water dripping from the trays.
Now, when a worker comes in here to water, they just go through with the hose and wet each individual tray?
That's right. Every tray is hand watered individually, and the people that do that have to climb these wooden stacks, and one by one they water the trays.
So this is very labor intensive.
This particular job, and yes, it actually is quite labor intensive.
Now these are all white mushrooms. Do you grow any other types?
Yes, we do. We have one type up here on the next stack. This is a brown mushroom of the same type, but it's one of our specialty mushrooms. It's a very good eating mushroom. It doesn't yield as many pounds as our white mushrooms do, so we concentrate primarily with the white mushroom strains.
Do those have a different flavor?
They have a little more intense flavor. I prefer them. If I have to eat mushrooms, I prefer eating brown mushrooms.
I see. But these aren't ones that you commonly find in the grocery store?
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
We hope that there will be a market developing for them, and they are a very nice mushroom for eating.
I see. Now, how long, these have made their little initials and are starting to grow. How do you harvest them, and where is that done?
Well, this actually is the last day in this particular room. We'll move these trays out to the harvesting area where they are hand harvested by pickers that climb up and down the stacks and do that job.
I see. Well, I understand that Jim and Pat are waiting for us there, so let's continue the tour and see how harvesting is going on.
This is your picking room. These are our picking rooms where we do our harvesting of the mushrooms.
Got quite a few mushrooms in here. These trays, how far along are these? Further along than the ones that we just looked at back in the...
The ones you just looked at are ready, will be moved up this evening, and in 3 days they should look like this. These have been sitting up here for 3 days after they've come out of the setback rooms.
Have you started harvesting these yet?
They picked a few off of here today, but tomorrow is going to be the big push from them, and the previous day, the next day also.
Okay. Now, once these are started, do you just pick forever? Or?
They will pick this one for several days and have strong picks, and after tomorrow and the next day it will decrease. and then it will set for a couple days to where there's not going to be a lot picked, but there will be some, and the beds will rejuvenate themselves in a sense that the smaller pins that are on there now will get a chance to grow up, and after 2 or 3 days of sitting in what looks like there's not much on there, you'll have this type of result again with a little bit fewer mushrooms on it.
So it kind of goes in
It
cycles.
goes in cycles.
There's a glut and then
You have a
hardly
big
anything.
peak, and then you move on, and we'll have about 4 of these, but each time you hit that big peak, it's less than the time before, to the point where you could still pick some, but there's not very much on there.
So how long do you keep them then? Can they go forever?
No, you start using up all the nutrition. You could go longer than what we do, but it becomes economically feasible to take these out and have a new crop put in.
How long is it?
They'll set up here for about a month, and what we'll be picking them, we'll pick those 4 phases. Each one of those phases requiring less and less that you'll get off of it in terms of mushrooms. But after that month period, you'll get down to where you're only picking about 1/4 of a pound of mushrooms per square foot, and you'll move them out of the room.
So all of this preparation that we've looked at so far is just for 4 weeks of picking of mushrooms, and then
4 weeks of picking of
And that's it.
mushrooms, and we take it and we move it into a room where we steam it and sterilize it again in order to have a clean, what we consider a clean tray when we move it into, when we put a new crop into it. And we'll leave it in a room for approximately 4 hours and steam it at 160 degrees and kill any bacteria or fungus or anything that might compete against the mushroom you're growing in this compost.
what do you do with the old compost?
The old compost makes great garden material,
I can
and we sell a lot of it just by pickup loads. They'll come out, local gardeners will come out and load it up in a pickup, and we also sell some as that a guy takes it and bags it up and sells it as a potting soil.
So again, how much time and preparation from spawning has it taken to get up to this?
It takes several weeks out on the wharf just preparing the compost, and we're in the phase 2 room, which is where we initially sterilize the material for 8 days. We put the spawn in it, or the seed, and we move it back into a room. It's in there for about 11 or 12 days. We take it back out and we put the peat moss layer on top of it and what we call the casing application, and it sets back for approximately another 2 weeks. It moves up here, and as you can see, in 2 or 3 days you're picking mushrooms.
But you're spending more time preparing than you actually
You're
are
spending
picking.
more time preparing than what you are picking it. And
How do you pick them? What are you looking for?
our pickers are looking for, on the mushroom, that the stem is the same size all the way down. It's like a cylinder. When you have a short, fat, pudgy stem, that mushroom isn't ripe. What you're looking for is the same diameter all the way down that stem. And a mushroom that's has a diameter size of the cap of a dime may be ready, whereas one that is a silver dollar may have 2 days to go. Just depends on
So
that
it's
stem.
not just the size of the cap. You have to look
Right.
at more than that.
Like I said, a mature mushroom may be very small in size, and whereas one that is relatively large to it may not be ready to pick yet.
So when are you picking that? I noticed these are all, the gills are closed. Sometimes you see mushrooms with the gills open.
The gills are closed, and that's when we want to pick them because they have a longer shelf life in the stores, and that's what the housewife will look for because she can buy it and keep it longer in the refrigerator. But for optimum flavor, the best thing to do is wait for the gills to open up. And that's the difference between like a green banana and a yellow banana.
So if you see mushrooms in the store where the gills have started to open, they're not spoiled.
They're not spoiled. In fact, that's the best flavor mushroom right there.
You just have to eat them quickly.
You just, if you're going to use them in sauces or prepare them or use them that evening, that's the best ones to use.
So when you sell mushrooms out of your farm here, do you do any grading on them? Is there?
We do grading. As the picker picks it, they're grading it and they're sorting it by three sizes, either a small, a medium, large, and also by ones that we haven't been able to get to in time and that the gills have opened up, and they'll put that in a fourth basket. That is ones that if we don't use right away is what will end up going to the cannery.
Okay. They're still perfectly good
They're
mushrooms.
still perfectly good
Actually,
mushrooms.
from what you're saying, they'd be the better flavored
They're
mushrooms.
the best ones.
You just don't have the shelf life of the others.
You can take the ones that have closed gills and we can pack them and ship them out this evening, and they can be in the stores for a week, to 10 days, and they'll still be perfectly good mushrooms, whereas ones that are what we call bed ripe, that have the gills exposed, the shelf life may be half of that.
What area of the country do you ship to?
Our market area, we try to maintain within a 350 to 400 mile range, and right now that takes us to Kansas City to our north, Dallas, Fort Worth to our south, Springfield, Missouri. We go to Tulsa, Oklahoma City as big market areas for us, and if you took a map from around where we're at and drew went out 400 miles and drew a circle, that's pretty much where we try to ship to.
But how much shelf life does a mushroom have after you pick it?
Depends on how it's handled in the store and by the housewife. If she takes it and she puts it in the refrigerator immediately and keeps it at a constant temperature, she could get up to 2 weeks of very good usable mushroom after that. But if it's not handled very well at the produce, whether it be through a produce stand or a grocery store, then you're looking at a much shorter shelf life. The worst thing they can do to it is let the temperature fluctuate. Take it out of the refrigerator and let it heat up and then put it back in. And that's going to cause it to open up and will cause it to have your browning effect and make it look like an older mushroom.
Is this from condensation?
That's from condensation. What happens
little water drops on it?
The mushroom will actually, the air condenses and you get water droplets on the mushroom surface, and it looks like the mushroom is sweating.
Well, you were talking a little bit earlier about another kind of mushroom, especially mushroom you were growing, the shiitake mushroom.
Right.
Can we go look at those?
Let's just head up the hall and we'll be on our way.
Okay. This is definitely a different looking operation than what we just came out of. These are shiitake mushrooms?
Shiitakes, right. It's a different kind of mushroom. It originated, it's an oriental type mushroom. When you talk about mushrooms in China and Hong Kong, Taiwan, this is what they picture in their mind, versus the American people picture what we've been talking about earlier in the white agaricus strain of mushroom. They produce more of these kind of mushrooms in the Orient than what they do of the regular kind, versus we're the exact opposite. We do get some importation of this kind of mushroom in the United States, but it's more in the nature of a dried mushroom. This type of mushroom has a real long shelf life, even before it's been dried. The housewife can keep it for several weeks in the refrigerator and lose no flavor, lose none of the texture, none of the color. As you can see, it's got a different color to it, it almost has a toadstool type look to it. The flavor is a very nutty almost flavor to it.
So it has a definitely different
It's
different
definitely
flavor.
a different flavor to it. It's mainly used in the United States and the fresh type as seasoning. Let's say you want to cook a pot of chili and you want to include mushrooms, you would slice some shiitake up with it, or you want to put it with omelets. And the flavor is in casseroles. The flavor is really pronounced. It stands out and reach out and you'll notice it rather than just.
It's not just texture, there's some
it's
flavor.
just not texture, there's a lot of flavor to it.
Now this room and all the other rooms we've been in have been cool and moist, and I know that they used to grow mushrooms in the dark.
That is really a misnomer, because the regular kind of mushroom, what we discussed earlier, doesn't require light, but it doesn't hurt to have it. And the reason we have all the lights in the room is so when the pickers go in there or the growers are in there working with the crops, they can see on how to work with it. This type of particular mushroom, the shiitake, requires light. Before, when we talked about flushing, the flushing stage where we actually initiated the mushroom itself, when you do that to this stage, instead of casing it with a peat moss layer, you go through the same type of steps, but you don't put the peat moss layer on top of it. But at that point, it requires light in order for it to pin. If you don't have that light, the pins won't develop. In this particular room, we'll leave the lights on 2 of the 3 shifts. So from early in the morning till about midnight, the lights will be on. From midnight till in the next morning, the lights will be turned off.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but what are they growing on? It's kind of an odd-looking thing.
It's not as odd as what's really in it. The original way of growing the shiitake is on oak logs, and they will take these oak logs in about 2-foot sections, drill holes in it, and place the mycelium, which is grown on a dowel rod, and they will wax over it, and that's how they spawn the log. It takes about 1.5 to 2 years before they will grow anything. Here, all this is sawdust. And we've taken that sawdust, we've soaked it to let it absorb a lot of moisture and give it a nice texture. What we've got right here is a bag of this sawdust, and it's just loosely lying around.
Looks like potting soil.
It looks like potting soil. It's got millet grain in there as a protein source, and also it's got some wheat bran in here. We'll take this one and sterilize it, put it in a steamer and sterilize it much the same way we do the other ones, a regular tray. We'll take it, let it cool down, and we'll put the spawn in here. After we put the spawn in here, it'll stay in there for approximately 4 months, and you'll get this. And you'll notice
that looks appetizing.
It grows better than it looks. It'll go solid white, and then it'll start turn brown again. When it starts turning that brown, that's when when it's getting ready to take out of the bag.
So this is loose, but the fungus is just holding it together in the block.
That's right. As the mycelium grows through there, it packs that sawdust back together, and if we could take this one out right now, it would hold its own shape and form, and that's what we do is we take it out of these logs, and they'll sit there. What we've done is we've put the log back together and used the mycelium as a glue.
Oh. So how long from that white stage until you start getting any production out of it?
It's in these bags after we spawn it for approximately 4 months. After we take that out, we'll leave it out of the bag for about a month, and you'll start to see the initiation of the pins. Then at that point, like the other mushrooms, they do grow very rapidly. What we're looking for here is we want those open gills. This one will be ready to pick tomorrow. It'll be flat, more like a pancake type nature. Right before it flattens out, we will pick it, and then it's ready to head to the market. They'll also be large in size when they're mature, or they may be small in size when they're mature.
Okay. Well, we thank you for showing us around. This has been fascinating, especially the shiitake mushrooms. And thank you again for showing us.
Thank you.